I want to welcome you back into the Lootpress Sports Lowdown. I'm your host, the sports editor here at lootpress.com, Tyler Jackson, joined as always by sports writer Rusty Udy. Rusty, how are you doing today?
Doing good. Looks like we finally got a taste of fall. Hopefully with soccer sectional regionals, we don't transition right to winter like we do seem to have to put up with sometimes. But the weather's great now, so it's been fun outside.
It's funny because we'll talk about it a little bit later, but you're going up to cover golf state championships this week. And usually Ogilvy, sometimes it can be around the 40s or 50s around this time. It seems like you might be able to avoid a little bit of that this time around.
Yeah, it's going to be nice. I think the mornings are going to be a little chilly, especially here too. But, I think the highs are in the high 60s with a lot of sunshine. So that's ideal golf weather. So maybe we'll see some good scores this year.
Absolutely. First thing I kind of want to talk to, and we'll get into the recaps and get into Week 7. But for those of you that read my weekly column, The Deep Post, I talked about Princeton's penalty issues, and it caused quite a stir. And, that's the thing, is we're always going to be honest about it. And everything I feel like I put in there was pretty objective for the most part. I added some subjective parts, and I was pretty transparent about that. But being truthful and being honest is the reason that in the area we've had 4 Kennedy Award winners, for Princeton in particular. I was the only guy in the room in 2020 south of Charleston pounding the table for Ethan Parsons to be a Moss Award winner. I pounded the table for Dom Collins to be the Kennedy Award winner, able to help push him there. And again, both times, the only writer south of Charleston. We've covered all these state championship teams. In the last couple of years, I had Bluefield my first year. We've had Independence. We've seen these teams get to Wheeling, play for them. We know what sets them apart. We see what they do and how they go throughout a season and what mistakes they do make and what mistakes they don't make. And I wrote about, again, the Princeton's penalties and all the issues that they had, and it finally caught up to head. We've talked about it every week, and it happened on Friday. They went to Winfield, and they were flagged for, I think, 6 unsportsmanlike conduct penalties. It ended up that Markel Lowe and Brad Moss were rejected, and I didn't speak much on that because I didn't see the videos. I don't know what led to their rejection specifically, but I just said mostly that it finally caught up to them. We talked about it. They have a reputation, and whether or not you want to admit it, it's true. And the reason I say that, I write the Deep Post, and 30% of everything that we hear and know is probably what makes it out. There's another 70% below
right.
below the surface that just never makes it out. Just a lot of stuff that would blow your mind. And I give a peek of that 70% when I write the Deep Post and some of that. When I tell you that that's become part of the reputation, it's because coaches are telling me that, officials are telling me that. Yep. It's for Princeton in particular, and I hate to pile on to them. But this has been a trend. You go back to Hurricane last year. There was a scuffle pregame at midfield there. It happened at Capitol this year. I was not at Winfield, so I can't say the nature of that. I heard that there was a lot of unsportsmanlike conduct penalties and issues from Winfield's side. They didn't want to shake hands, different things like that. I can't speak to that. When you covered their game with Beckley last year, there were some issues in the pregame there as well. There is a common denominator here, and it just seemed that Princeton seems to find themselves in these sort of situations, and I wrote about that. And I think everyone kind of hyper-focused on the Winfield game and just what happened there and the suspensions and everything like that, and that's not what it was. This isn't a one-off incident. We've talked about it. I bet they have over 700 yards in penalties so far. At least 100 and sportsmanlike conduct penalties. That doesn't go for any other procedural penalties they may have had on Friday, and then whatever penalties they had against Pulaski. That's just kind of what's been told to me. I had people there that were pro Princeton that just kind of said they felt like it got to a boiling point. Did Brad and Markel deserve to be ejected? Probably not. That was kind of what was told to me. But it was just at the point that they thought the officials were sick of it. And you and I had a discussion. You talked to a coach that you worked with years ago, where he said, the officials are human.
Right.
Whether or not you want them to be unbiased or not, they are human. These sort of things do factor in. Yep. They know these sort of things coming in. After a while, they just get sick of it. Yep. They're going to get a lot of flack for throwing flags, and whether or not they were merited, that's not for me to say. I wasn't there. But at the same time, when you set a precedent, when you have all this history of these penalties, it's going to come back to bite you. And now, for the time being, unless they win their appeals, they'll probably be without Mosser and Lowe, who are 2 of the best, I'd say 2 of the 5 best offensive players in the area. Yeah. And a lot of those things matter, and it's catching up to them. We talked about it. They might there are probably a lot of people in the Princeton community that are mad at me for writing those things,
Right.
but some of the things that are coming off the board take away from the kids' own candidacies when it comes to awards. Markel, we've lost track of how many touchdowns he's lost. I'd say it's over 8 touchdowns. You don't think that matters when it comes to Warner Award discussion or Kennedy Award discussion.
Yep.
You go to Brad Mosser, he's lost a couple receiving touchdowns. That comes into play when you talk about Moss Award. Barker's lost some of those touchdowns too.
Right.
So that's one less touchdown that Landon Morris contributed to, or Daniel Jennings, or whatever that. That's one less drive that they were able to get off the field that the opposing team may have scored.
Yep.
And to me, that matters a lot. We talked about it, but All-State's going to be trimmed down a little bit this year. There are 4 classes. There's not the same amount of kids.
Yep.
I think Princeton has 6 first-team All-State worthy kids. You got to get to Charleston first in order to get 6.
Yep.
And on top of that, it's like, all right, you got to start cutting. Who's the cutoff? Where's the cutoff at?
Yep.
And when you get down to it, sometimes it gets down to counting stats. Who has more numbers, or who lost penalties, or who did this or who did that. So it just costs you in so many different ways. And I think whenever you don't hold yourself accountable, or you don't take any accountability in these sort of situations, or you just want to pass the buck on and just not realize what's going on, it creates a big issue. I said it in post, but they're going to be number 2 when the ratings come out tomorrow. And then in 2 weeks, because they're on a bye this week, they'll be going to Beckley, and that's going to be a very difficult game for them. I'm not saying that they're going to lose. They're still really talented even without Brad and Markel,
Right.
but it puts them in a situation where they, if they lose that game, they don't really control their own fate anymore.
Right.
It's just very difficult. So I've had a lot of former coaches from Princeton. I had some former players from Princeton, even current players from Princeton that reached out to me, and they said, you're 100% right. You're spot on with it. We've got to take responsibility for it because it's going to hurt us. It's not hurting them right now. I had somebody that said, well, they're averaging 56 a game and only giving up 13. Go look at Bridgeport's results. They haven't given up a touchdown to an SSAC school this year. They've played 6 games too.
Right.
That's it. Go look at Fairmont Senior's results. They're all similar whenever you want to get into that numbers game.
And I think we've made that point pretty clear. I mean, we're not really talking about the teams that we think they're a ton better than. Mm-hmm. This is going to affect them down the line when you start getting into the Final 4 and the Final 8 teams. That's where it really becomes an issue. And I think the biggest, I agree with everything you put in there. I think it was spot on. The really sad part is we're not talking about Princeton, how great they are, how great that offense is, how great their defense is playing. We keep talking about other stuff, stuff that we really shouldn't be talking about, self-discipline kind of issues that, and I know some of that, people want to point fingers at the coach and stuff like that, but some of it boils down to the players. You've got to take responsibility for yourself and understand you're hurting your team. You're doing things you shouldn't be doing. And it doesn't seem like that's happening with some players and stuff. And, like we've talked before, they've got away with it, and I don't know if that's the biggest thing that's, hurt them so far and kept this thing going just a little bit. But, they're not going to get away with that kind of stuff going forward because, coaches, I guarantee you they're talking with their players, mm-hmm. and I guarantee you they're pushing buttons. I mean, it happens. I mean, anytime you play sports, anytime in kind of athletics, if you can get a mental edge on somebody, that's exactly what you do. If you can get them off their game, that's exactly what you do. Now, you don't want to step over the line and do things you're not supposed to, but you can get right on that line and do things, to kind of get the team, off balance and everything. And I think maybe that's a little bit of what happened this weekend. I mean, unfortunately, I was not shocked at what happened. I think it's really sad at what happened because, now we're going to have an issue of how is that going to affect them going forward against Beckley because, Beckley's a very good team. They're very capable of beating Princeton. Mm-hmm. And when you take a runner like Lowe off the field and then arguably maybe the best receiver in the state off that team, it affects things. It changes things, and Beckley can scheme differently because of it.
Especially, for Beckley, and we'll talk about this later on, but Beckley has 2 really good secondary players.
Exactly.
So, you're taking a strength and on strength, and you're kind of weakening yourself at that a little bit. And again, Princeton has capable players. They'll still go into that game with Chance Barker and Landon Moore and Daniel Jennings and Caleb Kaiser. Those kids will all still be there. All really good players. But it impacts a lot of what you're able to do, and that was kind of just my thing is, and I know it made a lot of people upset, but you have to look at it from an accountability standpoint. It's just not sustainable towards winning a state championship.
Yep.
Anybody that's watched Bridgeport or seen them play, they know like it's hard down to down. It's extremely hard to stop that single wing running attack. It comes at you. It takes such a physical toll. So to get to third down and to make a stop, and then to get a penalty that just extends the drive,
right.
it's killer. It wears on you. That's exactly what Bridgeport does. And next thing you know, if you get down 10-2 scores to Bridgeport, it's a killer. Mm-hmm. I think that last year's playoff game in the semifinal was just a perfect example of a Bridgeport, like what happens there. You're up 28-7 at halftime, and then Bridgeport wears you down so much that they're ringing off 40 points in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of that had to do with some Princeton turnovers, but it just kind of speaks to it. They just don't quit. They keep coming at you. And those are the teams I think that Princeton's gunning for and that they're going to be playing for.
Right.
The Spring Valleys, Herbert Hoover, Fairmont Senior, Princeton. I think that they're all
There's
in the
a lot of
mix
tough
there.
games ahead. I mean, once they get, even the first round games are not going to be a cakewalk, but definitely once you get into the quarterfinals, it's a real deal, and you can't be having careless penalties all the time. Look at Alabama under Nick Saban. I mean, they did not win all the national championships being reckless and careless. They're very disciplined and took care of business, or he got really after him. So, I just think it's a shame, because I think that team legitimately has a chance to win the state title, but playing like they're playing, I don't believe so.
Yeah, and I just think some people are getting too lost in the whole results process of it instead of the actual process of it. Okay, like how are we getting to it? You need to have a process that's sustainable.
Right.
And while scoring points is very sustainable for them, doing so in the manner where you have to get all these different plays, where you have to go 20 yards for first down, 15 yards for a first down, especially especially against some of the better defenses in the state,
Right.
It just becomes a lot more difficult.
Yep.
You can't let a team like a Winfield. This isn't a disrespect to Winfield, who's had a really good program. They've been a program that's played in the quarterfinals the last couple years. They've been top seeds, but they are a bubble team. They're a 500 team.
Right.
You beat them by 27 points as a top tier team,
Yep.
and they're number 16 in the ratings. That's the definition of a bubble team. Right there. You look it up. That's exactly what it is. Mm-hmm. You just can't let them get under your skin,
right.
And it's going to cost you two of your best players. And again, I've not seen the play, so I can't say what happened with Markel and Brad or what they happened.
But the officials too are trying to keep the game under control,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not saying they were right by any means, but they are going to probably react quicker to things than normal because they don't want it blowing up into something, And, I'm not trying to justify the penalties or anything like that, but it's just the way things work. And, you've got to understand the reputation that you're carrying, and you've got to take some self-responsibility and change that reputation.
Yeah, and it's going to be extremely difficult. I think for the rest of the year, they're kind of saddled with it. So now they have to overcorrect that much more. I'm the type of person I'd imagine you're probably going to average about 6 or 7 penalties a game. Like, that's fine. Like, but when you're getting into that 10, 11, 12, hundreds of yards range.
And so many personal fouls, unsportsmanlike penalties, things that, maybe 1 or 2 a game or something, but when you start getting into multiple ones of those, that's not good.
Yeah, if I could tally the exact number, like I said, I'm pretty sure that it's over 700 yards in penalties, but they've lost more yards in penalties than what Markel Lowe has rushed for.
Yeah.
Again, he's our reigning running back of the year, our second team All-State running back, a really good. It's just insane that you've lost that much yardage, and it's not all on offense. There's some on defense. There's some on special teams, and I didn't even care as much. There's going to be holdings, different things like that.
Right.
But to me, whenever you're getting into the unsportsmanlike conduct penalties, which have kind of increased a little bit, there were a couple offsetting against Tazewell. There were some against Capital. That's when it's troubling because 15 yards is 15 yards. That's a big chunk.
Yep.
Absolutely. I think that's going to wrap up that part of the penalties. But I felt, this was probably a better medium for me to explain it. Again, I know a lot of people weren't happy with it. They thought it was extremely critical. And in a sense, it was critical, but it was also very objective. That's the truth of it. They're a heavily penalized team, and I think it's caught up to them. And
that's nothing we've really ever seen.
Yeah.
Not since I've been covering sports.
And subjectively, I really think that, they should probably count their lucky stars that if a situation like this is going to happen, it happened here and not in the playoffs.
Right,
Because
right.
if you go into Black Friday and you don't have Markel or Brad or whoever gets flagged for a penalty, whoever would get kicked out, then you're in real trouble.
Yeah, and really kind of glancing down their schedule, just kind of off the top of my head, I know people want to point to the amount of points they put up there, but really none of those games Princeton should have lost. And I mean, Hurricanes not quite what we thought they were, beginning of the year, giving up tons of points anyway to about everybody. So, I don't think that's really a focus, because Princeton should be winning these games that they're winning. It's just the games that start to finally become iffy game. Beckley, how's it going to work in that kind of game?
And there's a lot of points to be had there. Parkersburg South later in the year, there's going to be a lot of points to be had there.
Heck, you'd be the number one team in the state on AAA. That'd be huge. That'd be huge.
Absolutely.
But it could kill you.
Yeah. And again, that just kind of wraps that up. I want to go ahead and get into the Week 6 recap. Some of the other games. Independence at Oak Hill. I kind of want to start there. That was that was a really interesting game. We kind of go into some of these games and we look at how some games for Oak Hill have transpired this year, and it's we're kind of wondering how do they stop this or how do they stop that. And I just looking at the box score, I think the thing that Oak Hill really did really well is what we said. Hey, we're going to overload on Silas, make somebody else beat us. And I think when they sent official stats, they had him for 24 carries for 72 yards, which again is inefficient. You had him, I think, for about 50-something yards. Inefficient. He did score 3 touchdowns, but from down to down, that's 2 yards per carry. And it's not really a sustainable offense when you have to run it through that all night. So, and there were a lot of turnovers. Turnovers were luck, but this really good win for Oak Hill.
Really, when I talked to Devon at the beginning of the year, the defense was a little bit of a question mark. Lost a good bit of players over there, but he felt like he had some really good leaders, and especially in the linebacking core. And I've just been really amazed at how well they can stop the run at times and still pressure the quarterback at the same time. Usually it's kind of a give and take on that. But, in all fairness to Brock Green, he was constantly under pressure all night. I mean, I thought the first interception he threw was just a bad throw and, kind of deep in their end, and that was, maybe unadvised, I guess is a good way to put it. But, I mean, the other times he was running for his life all night. He didn't really have any chance to do much, and I think they had a drive or two, maybe one, but Nelson didn't really have many breakaways. He got the scores down by the goal, but I mean, there was a bunch of times that 2 times in the fourth quarter, Oak Hill had to stand up against Independence. They gave them the ball basically in the red zone, and the defense stood up, stood tall, and stopped them. So, I've been really impressed with the defense on their side. Still kind of shaking my head with the offense as far as Oak Hill goes. I don't know, they just haven't found a rhythm, haven't been clicking much, and I think that they could have hit some plays on offense. Maybe they could have opened that game up a little bit, but credit to Independence's defense for what they did. It came down to basically a 2-point conversion at the end of I think it was about 1 minute and 7 seconds on the clock. And, of course, Coach Liz said he didn't come over there to tie. They came over to win. They don't work, as hard as they do for ties. But, they were going to go for it. And thought it was a pretty good play. But, it seemed like J.D. Moritz was in the huddle. I mean, he kept flying through. And, Brock never really even had a chance to do anything with the ball. I mean, it's like he took 2 steps and Moritz was right on top of him. So, credit to Oak Hill's defense and the work they've done. But one of the better football games I've seen in quite a while. It was 21-20, I believe, was final. So it was fun to watch.
Yeah, and it's easy to question that decision to go for 2. But I wrote about it in Deep Post. I thought it was a good decision. We talked about it. Oak Hill not Oak Hill, but Independence is really banged up at this point.
Right,
even coming off of a bye, they're starting a bunch of young kids along that line. And a lot of these kids are 2-way starters.
Right.
So you're adding, say you get the ball in 20, it takes Oak Hill 5 plays or so to score, or they do whatever they do.
Yep.
Then you have to go and you get your opportunity for your 5 or 6 plays or whatever. So that's 11. So if you tie, then it just keeps extending, and you're adding 30, possibly 30 extra plays depending on how far it goes. By that point, you get the 2 points, you give your kids a chance to win the game there, and then get out of there healthier. I like the decision.
Yeah, I did too. I mean, and it was fun, as far as the drama goes, and it was a fun night. Crowds was big, it was packed, so it was fun to watch. But and I was really impressed with Independence's defense. How well, I thought they would have trouble containing Devin Richardson, which at times they did. I think he rushed for about 99 yards or something, but they really gave up almost nothing in the pass game, and that's pretty big because they kind of struggled in some games with mobile quarterbacks and giving up big plays in the pass game. So it was a good defensive effort. It's just couldn't quite get the conversion that they needed. Whether that been a field goal or a 2-point conversion or whatever, to kick over the edge. But, it was a good win for Oak Hill.
And I will say, I think that they're unlikely to find an athlete like Richardson in the rest of their schedule.
Exactly.
At quarterback. I mean, you look at it. Vance is a good athlete. He's not really as quick as what Richardson is.
Right.
Really good passer. Princeton, Barker's a good athlete, more of a passer. And then in AA, I don't think that there's anybody in the playoffs that is going to have a quarterback quite like Richardson.
Yeah.
So that bodes well. If you're Independence, you really wanted to walk away with this one and set yourself up with some nice points, because there are a lot of points opportunities in the back end, and this was one of them. But you will still get strength of schedule points from Oak Hill, I believe.
And John was pretty clear with, when he talked to the team afterwards, he was proud of them. He told them, they played a really good game, and especially considering the amount of kids they had out and things like that. But, bottom line is they're just trying to make the playoffs, and they're a lot like Bluefield. They're just trying to get in, and once you get in, then it's just a game at a time.
Yeah, I think they proved last year that they're the team that if you're a top 4 seed, you're kind of sweating if Independence ends up on the back end and they got to come to your place first round. So, moving on to Westside Liberty, this was the game that I was at Friday. Really, it was. I know the final score was 21 to 61 to 25 or 22, I think. I can't remember the exact score. But it was a competitive game. 9 minutes to go in the third quarter, it was a 25-22 game, and it really looked like it could go any way. And then there are some penalties that piled up. I think Liberty had a 2nd and 21 with the ball, and they got a screen pass. They got them about 30 yards down to about the west side 27, and it was called back because of a penalty. And then the 4 drives end with interceptions, and Westside capitalizes on all of them. This is our first look at Westside. I got to say, I was extremely impressed with Caden Vance. He's right there in the running for one of the best quarterbacks in the area, definitely in AA in the state. Just has the mobility, the arm talent, able to do a little bit of everything. But the thing that really stood out to me in this game was Westside being able to find a little bit more of a run game with freshman Noah Ellis. I think he only had 2 or 3 carries coming into the game, and he had about 9 for 90. And this has probably been my biggest gripe with Westside this year, is I think they're too dependent on what Vance can do, whether it be in the run game. And Vance he's not like he's a big kid, more of a stronger kid, but he's not like big, like fullback big or anything like that. And eventually those hits are going to pile up on him. I think against Man, he had a 30 carry game, and that's just not what you want, especially when so many of your hopes hinge on the quarterback. I look at a team like Princeton. I think if they lost Chance Barker for a game or two, it would hurt a lot, but I think that they'd be able to manage. I think if Westside lost Caden Vance for a game or two, I think it'd be catastrophic to what they're able to do. But yeah, to me, that's the big thing, is maybe finding some a running back there, and just being able to put the game away. I asked Justin Koger about it, the head coach at Westside. You guys were in a similar spot 2 weeks ago against Pikeview. What did you learn here? And he kind of just made some adjustments. So we hung with it, and we were able to get this thing going, and they scored, and they really didn't leave any meat on the bone after a while.
I'm going to kind of date myself a little bit, but Justin reminds me, Caden reminds me a lot of Major Harris in a way. Major wasn't the fastest dude in the world, but it's like he could never be hit. He was always juking people, and I think Caden's a lot like that. He can find a way to get loose and get find the seams and different things like that. And some of the videos that you sent me of the game, I mean, I was really impressed the way he threw the ball.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, he threw some, he threw some dimes. You know, some of them got dropped, unfortunately, but he really threw the ball well. And if he has time and can get a receiver, yeah, he's going to be deadly. But I think this week will be the telling tale of just how good he really is this year. They've got a tough one coming up, and I've been impressed with him. I mean, that's I was funny when I kind of watched him. I'm like, man, it looks like a major out there.
Yeah, he just does a good job. When he throws deep, he does a good job of rainbowing it. It's not like kind of lasering it or keeps it low where DBs have a chance to get it.
Yeah.
I feel like he really puts it in a position to where it's hard for a defensive back to make a play on it, especially if he has a receiver one-on-one. It's like, you're going to get it or not. But yeah, I thought it was a good win for them. And obviously they're still undefeated. They're trying to build a playoff case, and you want to be undefeated going into this next game.
Exactly.
We'll talk about that in a minute. Greenbrier Ace at Shady Spring. We talked about this. We thought it could kind of be a little bit of a more sided for Greenbrier Ace, and it was by the end. I think Greenbrier Ace ended up winning by 2 scores. Really good game for Brady May. We were kind of curious to see how Greenbrier Ace passing attack would kind of try to attack Shady Spring secondary. It seemed like they were just, all right, we'll just avoid it altogether and keep the ball on the ground. And Brady May, 25 carries, over 100 yards, 4 touchdowns, really efficient. They did a good job. For Shady, I kind of came away thinking this was their litmus test, like we talked about, and it's tough. I don't think, just kind of looking at how the ratings have gone, it'll knock them out of the playoffs losing this game. But it is tough. I think it almost locks you into you're going to be on the road in the first round if you get in the playoffs.
Yep. And I think the one thing Greenbrier East brought to the table that maybe some of the other teams didn't, maybe Roan did. I didn't watch that game fully, but they can throw it and run it. And when you've got Brody Hamrick back there who can really hurt you with the pass game, it does kind of open the run game up a little bit, and that did allow for some big scores from May. So they kind of got down. They got a couple onside kicks to kind of squeeze the game back in just a little bit, and make Greenbrier East sweat just a little bit after the Bluefield excitement. But I just felt like Greenbrier East controlled the game, and it was that's kind of what we wanted to see from Shady. Could they play against one of the bigger AAA schools? How could they do against them? But I think it's going to be tough because if you get into the playoffs, if you're around 14, 15, or 16, you're starting to think Fairmont Senior, Bridgeport.
Princeton.
Yeah, that's rough.
Yeah.
That's rough.
One thing I kind of want to point out too is Greenbrier East really needed this game. You look at the back end of that schedule, Nitro. They've got Nicholas County, who's a tough football team, and then Princeton. It is extremely tough, and I think right now they're 2 and 3. You're trying to climb out of that hole and sneak into the back end, and
there's opportunities there, but they're difficult.
They're not easy opportunities. If you can get 1 or 2 of them, there are a lot of points to cash in to help propel you, but you really needed to win the ones that were there for you. And Shady's going to provide some points for him.
Exactly.
We think that Shady's probably going to be 8-2, 7-3 at worst. Opportunities down the road there.
Yep.
I want to move on. James Monroe played twice last week, twice in 4 days. I covered the first game, the odd Tuesday game, but they ended up beating Narrows, another strong defensive effort. Bryce Gardner had 2 interceptions and a forced fumble. And then they played they played Summers County at Summers County. And this was kind of what we talked about. It's turnaround. Not only are you playing 2 games in 4 days, but playing Summers County is a physical game.
Right.
They want to run the ball at you. They've been successful running the ball on everybody. We talked about when they played Greenbrier West. They ran 70 plays and rushed for over 200 yards. By most statistical metrics, James Monroe did a good job of shutting them down. I think they held them to probably their lowest or second lowest rushing total of the season. I can't remember what they had against Shady Spring. But it made them into a passing team. They threw the ball 21 times, which is by far the most that they've thrown it this year. And another Gardner interception, returned it for 6. I think this is kind of the theme of what James Monroe is going to be. You're halfway through the season. You are what you are. They're going to struggle on offense a little bit. It's predominantly a run team. I was looking at Leighton Dowdy's numbers. I think he has 3 touchdown passes, which is a major drop from what we've seen over the last 2 years.
Right.
But you also have to look at the infrastructure and personnel around him.
Right.
You know, they're more suited to be a running team.
Yep.
They don't have an Eli Allen, which the kids like that
Chaz
are rare.
Boggs,
Chaz
yeah.
Boggs,
Yeah.
yeah. They have more guys that we're going to grind it a little bit more.
Yep.
But the defense is still there, and it showed itself this
Yeah.
week.
I mean, I know when we talked about the game coming up, you know, we kind of joked about, you know, it could be a field goal game because, you know, both defenses are going to be so good. And, you know, I think James Monroe has just really kind of moved up that level, up to the upper level as far as defenses go. And they're going to be incredibly hard to score on and be opportunistic, you know, get the points where they need them. And they're not going to beat teams 42-7 or, you know, 49-7, things like that. They're going to beat teams 20-0 or 20-7, something like that. I think that's exactly who they are. But they're just going to do some old school football. You know, they just try to take care of the ball on offense, play solid defense, and take care of your opportunities.
Yeah, and I will say whenever you have the defense, you always give yourself a chance. If you can keep that thing low scoring, all you got to do is, you know, a mishandled snap or something like that, an interception return, and that's the game kind of right there. And I'd actually talked to Coach Mustaine about it because in the second half of that game, up until the final drive, I think they only had, you know, 30 or 40 yards.
Yeah.
And he said, you know, it's a real thing right now. You know, I don't know what it is, but we come out the second half and we struggle offensively. We did it against Shady Spring. I think it has just more to do with personnel. It's just kind of who they are. You know, they're more bulky, bigger builds. They're built on running the football right now with what they have, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
I think that it just kind of lends itself to, you know, smaller offensive output. You're not going to throw for 300 yards or anything like that, or 200 yards whenever.
Yeah, they just don't have the dynamic playmakers they've had in the past. I mean, and in all fairness, there's not, you know, in a true, I know
a semifinal and state championship run,
Yeah, I mean, you got, you know, guys like Eli Allen, who was just incredible on both sides of the ball. I mean, Cooper Ridgeway, I mean, you know, a lot of people don't realize just how good that kid was, you know, on both sides of the ball. So, you know, Chaz Boggs was incredible as far as getting passes and making, you know, a little out pass into an 80-yard touchdown pass. So, you know, it just, you lose players like that, you know, and they don't come around every single year. And what I feel like James Monroe is still a true single-A team. You know, you just don't have those kind of athletes all the time, but they are making a lot of headway with what they do have, and that's good coaching.
And we got 2 more games in the docket, and the last one we'll touch on briefly. But let's go to Meadow Bridge at Gilmer County. This was the Caden Sims game. Caden Sims, which every game sort of seems to be the Caden Sims game. 400 yards. We knew it was coming at some point. He was probably going to get to that mark, 400 yards, 6 touchdowns, and the cherry on top to me, 17 tackles on defense.
Yeah.
It reminded me a lot of Caleb Richmond, who was running back there, I think, in 2018 or so, where he just, I don't think he missed a snap, and he was just averaging 16 tackles on either side of the ball, and he played running back as well.
Yeah.
Now, Caden's a much bigger kid than what he is,
Right.
but that's one heck of a performance. So I put their stats in the system today. I haven't been able to tally everyone's yet. He's over 1,000 yards in 4 games. He's our first 1,000-yard rusher. And a lot of that's, you know, he rushed for 300 one night and 400 the next night, so 250 a game. Pretty impressive performance.
When Coach Reichert sent me the breakdown Saturday morning, you know, you just kind of glanced through it, and I knew what the score was. But, I mean, 409 yards jumps off the page. I mean, that 6 touchdowns jumps off the page, too. And I sent a message back to him, and I was like, man, what a game, you know, something to that effect. And his response was, yeah, we kind of had to lean on him heavily. And I'm like, yeah, that may be the biggest understatement of the world. So, and I'm sure when he typed it, you know, he had that little grin that Coach Reichert always has when he says that kind of stuff. So, yeah, kudos to Caden. I mean, you know, he's a good kid. You know, he's a funny kid because, you know, I talked to him about, you know, those big running games like that and stuff, and he talks about how he's not really an agile type kid. You know, he just gets it and kind of basically goes north and south, which, you know, is working pretty good right now. So, you know, that's a historic night. I mean, that's a huge one.
Absolutely. You know, good for him. Like I said, 1,000 yards is nothing to sneeze at.
Yep.
And, you know, that's with the consideration that they accepted the win by a forfeit.
Right.
So he didn't get to play that game. I took that opportunity away.
Yep.
Yeah, just really impressive all around.
2,000 yards is not off the not off the table.
not at this pace, no. Yeah, absolutely. Last game, of course, Princeton at Winfield. We healing a little bit with what we opened with. Just impressive all around. I do kind of want to pull up the stats and just kind of go over exactly what they were able to do. Maybe. There we go. Yeah. So Chance Barker, 14 of 16 passing, 288 yards, 5 touchdowns. Markello, 8 carries, 121 yards, 2 touchdowns. Jennings, 10 for 87 and a touchdown. R.J. Coatney, 2 for 8. Receiving-wise, Brad Monster, 8 for 166 and 2 touchdowns. Garrett Mays, 2 for 53 and a touchdown. Markello, 2 for 52 and 2 touchdowns. So Lowe essentially turned 2 touchdowns into 10 touches into 170 yards, 4 touchdowns. I think it was Monster's best game of the season, and we talked about it. We thought they were going to go into this game extremely motivated. Yeah. It was a good way to send a statement to the rest of the state. And if you just kind of look at it from the perspective, if you throw out the penalties and all that, and even if you put in the penalties, you go to somebody's house and it's natural grass, it's not turf or anything like that, like what Princeton is accustomed to. And I think they played all but maybe one of their games on turf this year. I think the Pulaski game was on grass too. You go in there, you're able to replicate what you're able to do, and even with the penalties, you're still able to put up 55 points and just kind of have your way about it. It is impressive that they're just able to kind of keep steamrolling.
Yeah. And I think that's the biggest thing, and that's the the take I hope people are getting from this is like even though we've talked about their penalty situation, we're extremely impressed with Princeton. They do stuff like this every week like it's their business. And Winfield may be basically a 500 team, but that's still a good football team, and they made them look pretty pedestrian. So it's just another big win, and the thing that's impressive about them is you see teams maybe have lapses at times, because maybe they know they're going to blow out a team or beat them bad, but they still seem to be able to figure out how to put the foot on the gas pedal and just run over teams. And that's why I want to see them get that penalty situation straightened out, because man, how good can they be?
The best version of this team is scary.
Exactly.
That's the thing about it. I don't think that most people understand it. We do, because we're in these all-state meetings. We hear what these athletes are doing.
Yeah.
We're voting on them. We're always covering these state championships. We've seen a lot of them. And like I said, we've covered Independence making 2 runs. We've covered Greenbrier West making a run. We've covered James Monroe making a run. We've covered Princeton making a run. We've covered Bluefield making runs. And we've seen them win state championships. So we've seen what puts these teams over the top. And that's why we talk about it. It's like there's so much more that this team can do to get over the top.
Yeah. That is scary.
Yeah. Some of the notes that I had from this week that were just really impressive. I want to talk A.J. Thomas from Beckley. Had his 5th interception of the season. I talked about the Ed Reed thing. If you're a quarterback out there, put it on your wristband. Avoid number 5. I think he's number 5.
Yeah.
If I see number 5 shading in one area or one side of the field, I'm like, all right, I'm sorry, but that half the field's cut off.
Yeah.
He's just on a tear right now. And this is after Preston's quarterback had a really good game in the Buckwheat Bowl the week before. So it's not like he's a slouch or anything like that. And then Pikeview and Wyoming East picking up their first wins. It's always good, especially for Pikeview. It's been tough, but you talked about it. You're kind of buying into what Coach Turner is selling over there. Apparently the kids are too. They went up there. They had some nice plays. They had an interception to seal it. And you spoiled homecoming for Sissonville. And anytime you get to go and spoil somebody's homecoming, the truth of the matter is, I've heard Montcalm kind of joke about this, but we've gone some years where we were somebody's homecoming 8 times a year.
Exactly.
And Pikeview, with some of the struggles the program has had, I'm sure that they're sort of in that same situation. So it adds a little bit of a pleasure to it when it's like, all right, they were Shady Springs homecoming. It's okay, like we went up there, we were able to, hey, don't schedule us for homecoming next year. And then Wyoming East getting to pick up a win on homecoming over Mount View. I think it was a 13-12 game. So entertaining, thrilling, a couple years off the lives. And then Montcalm quarterback Jalen Younger, they did lose this past week, but he went over 1,000 yards, which, not only that in itself is impressive for Montcalm, but he's done it for 3 straight years. He's the only active player. I thought Caden Vance may have done it, but I think he only had 600 or 700 yards passing his sophomore year.
Right.
So, kudos to Jalen. I don't know where Montcalm ends up as far as the playoffs go, or if they're able to get in. but it's still pretty impressive from a small school. 1,000 yards passing is nothing to sniff at, and to just do it and to be able to be that consistent obviously speaks to what he's been able to do in his receivers. So nice little achievement.
Yeah, and you touched on Pikeview and Wyoming East. I've been on. Over the years I played in different sports, I've been on both ends of that, teams that were really productive and teams that struggled. And, when you do get that win, it does make Monday practice a little more exciting, a little more easier to come to and things like that. So, that's a big for them. And, a thrilling way too, to get the interception at the end of the game to kind of seal it a little bit. But, Pikeview, I'm pretty sure that was their third straight road game, 3 at least, if not 4. So, that's even bigger, So, kudos to them and Wyoming East, they're trying to build some things there and even Mountain View, with the, competitive game, trying to build some stuff down there over time. So, I think we're a few weeks down the road towards that game, but I think the Montcalm Meadow Bridge game might be an interesting game for both of those teams.
Very impactful from a playoff standpoint.
Yep.
But moving on to, is there anything else that stood out from you from week 6?
No, I was just pretty impressed with the defenses. Some of them looked really good, and it's been a kind of a defensive year this year, which is a nice change from the last few years doing, these boxes that take 3 hours to type up.
Yeah, absolutely. Week 7, some of the games that we have on slate here, the 2 that we will be at, Independence at Westside and Greenbrier West at James Monroe. Overall, the ones we're going to preview here: Independence at Westside, Greenbrier East at Oak Hill, West at James Monroe, Liberty at Shady Spring, Riverview at Tug Valley. Kind of want to start off with Independence at Westside. I'm going down the Clear Fork for that one. We've hinted on this throughout the year, the lead up to it, what it could mean, and it's going to be a big game for both teams. For Westside, it's probably their biggest litmus test of the year.
Yep.
This is the program that locally has kind of been there the last couple of years, top of the AA heap. And if you're Westside, not only do you send a statewide statement if you win this game, but you let them know you feel confident about yourself as well. It's like, okay, like we did this. We beat them. They're a really good team. They've beaten good teams. They played there with Hoover. They've beaten Scott. If we're Westside, we feel pretty good about making another run to a state championship. And if you're Independent, you go in here trying to let them know we're still on top. We still got this. And there's also the points implications. If you're Independent, you go here and you win this game, you're right there on track, still in the hunt for a home playoff game. If you're Westside, you do a really good job of almost locking up home playoffs throughout, at least 2 rounds.
Yeah, I think that's really key for Westside, because the schedule doesn't have a bunch of points, down the rest of the way. So I think it's really big for them. It's not do or die by any means. I think they still have a really good shot, and I really feel like they'll make the playoffs. But, this home field advantage games are important, especially early in the playoffs, when you're trying to finally get your feet wet just a little bit. You haven't been in the playoffs a little while. It's kind of easier to do those things at home a little bit, So, I look for them to really come out. I know they've taken some poundings over the last few years, so I'm sure, probably Justin's reminding them of those things. But, it's going to be a tough one. Independence is really good, even banged up. They were really impressive against Oak Hill. If they don't get pressure on the quarterback, I think Westside's going to have some big struggles against them. I don't know how effective, Independence will be getting Caden down, but they'll definitely be putting a lot of pressure on him. They put a lot of pressure on Richardson, so it's a matter of if they can get him down, or if Caden can get loose, and once he gets loose, he's pretty dangerous. So it's going to be a fun game. It's one that we've kind of circled on the schedule way back at the beginning, the kind of for various reasons, but it's kind of Westside's moment in the sun right now.
Yeah, my key for this one, I think Independence is going to have to buckle up and just say, hey, like, it's not going to be Caden Vance and Kyler Canada beating us. It's somebody else beats us, that's fine, but it's not going to be you two.
Yep.
Bring pressure on Vance, try to make him beat you. Bring pressure on Vance and try to kind of keep him bottled up and keep Canada from getting loose deep. Yep. I think that's kind of your game plan there. And if you're Westside, maybe try to do the same and go with the same strategy that Independence did, try to keep Silas in check. And, again, easier said than done, because
Right.
Silas, I think, now is probably the second leading rusher in the area after what Sims did.
Right.
But he's on an all-state path. Try to force the freshman quarterback into mistakes. That's the best ideal. And again, that's not a knock on Brock Green. It's just experience. Sometimes you can throw different things at them and maybe bait them into a mistake. Devon Marion told you after the game, he read somewhere that Independence had 4 freshmen along their offensive line. So that's going to be the chess match that I'm watching there. Is what are these two teams trying to take away from each other?
Yeah, it's easy to draw up a game plan. It's another thing execute.
Yeah.
And that's I think Brock would have been fine if he wasn't under such pressure all night. I was really impressed the way he threw the football. He did not look like a freshman quarterback. Now, he didn't have his best game, but every time I've seen Oak Hill play, they have a defensive scheme that just makes the quarterback, puts them under such pressure that none of them's had good games really against him outside of Princeton. But I just think it's going to be tough to do both. For Westside to stop Nelson and pressure Green. I don't know if they could do that.
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be fun to watch.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one.
Greenbrier East, Oak Hill, this is another interesting one we've talked about. You've seen both of these teams. You talked about Greenbrier East and how they struggled to protect up front whenever they played Woodrow. Oak Hill is a bit interesting. They were able to bring pressure. I think that this, you go in with the record, you think about it, this is another interesting game for me. Hamrick, another good passer, and they've got some good receivers. May coming off of a strong game. And again, Oak Hill kind of seems to have good game plans against these sort of teams. It's interesting because I don't think Greenbrier East is so dependent on one player or the production of one. I think they like getting the ball out to Subtle, but they also have Burdett and they have May. They have some really good players. The one thing that does concern me a little bit sometimes is Greenbrier East defense. Will Oak Hill finally be able to get its passing game going? That's where Bluefield was able to attack Greenbrier East and get some things going there. This could be the opportunity if you're Oak Hill. You're halfway through the season. You kind of wonder if you're ever going to get it going or if it's just kind of who you are. And this might be your opportunity to do so.
Yeah, I think you hit it the nail right on the head. I think it's all about the Greenbrier East defense. I think Oak Hill's defense is going to limit how much production that Greenbrier East can actually have. I think they'll probably have some scores without. I don't think they'll get shut out, but I just don't know what Greenbrier East can do defensively to stop Moritz and some of the speed they have, and when Richardson does get out in the open field, how they're going to be able to tackle him, are they going to be able to pursue him, bring him down? I think that's I don't know. That's going to be the big key. I think Oak Hill is really wanting this game pretty bad, and the fact that it is a AAA game. There's plenty of points there that kind of keeps them moving up the ladder, and what you've talked before. When Devon always seems to have the answer. So we'll see what that coaching staff. I mean, of course, he gives a lot of credit to his defensive coaches for scheming, and a lot of what they did in the Independence game came at halftime. They made a lot of adjustments at halftime. They were looking at the film. They had 20 minutes. They had plenty of time to look at things. They made some changes in the second half, and it was really effective. So I think Greenbrier East is going to have their hands full with that defense, but I just don't know if they can stop Richardson and Moritz.
Yeah, he might be the poster child for second half adjustments or doing things at halftime, because I remember when they played Beckley last year, they had a screen play, a running back screen that they ran really well that I think kept a drive alive that they ended up getting a touchdown from, and they won that game by 1 score. So hearing that, it kind of checks out. One thing that I think this could be a J.D. Moritz game just because Greenbrier East is small, and J.D. Moritz is big. He's very big.
Yeah, he's a load, and when he hits you about 20 times, it gets harder and harder to tackle him. So I thought Independence did a good job against him, but there were times that you could really tell. There was 3 or 4 of them that were having to bring him down.
Mm-hmm. And I think Independence is bigger than what Greenbrier East was too. So that's something to watch. You get to go and cover the latest installment in the rivalry, Greenbrier West at James Monroe. They're different classes, obviously. James Monroe's in AA, Greenbrier West is in single A. Greenbrier West is coming off a tough loss to Fort Fry, and I got to say, we went going in thinking that could be a blowout. It wasn't as bad as I thought it could possibly be.
Greenbrier West had some players missing too due to injuries and stuff. So I was really you never, I guess, are impressed with the loss, but we thought it would be much worse.
Yeah, but obviously we talked about this could be like a 3-0 game. Two defenses kind of clanging on each other. I can't imagine James Monroe is the healthiest. When you come off of 2 straight games, it's got to take a bit of a toll for you. And Greenbrier,
that's physical they play.
Yeah, exactly. It's all contact. Like, it's not like, throw a screen pass, your kid gets out of bounds and kind of gets a break from getting hit. It's head on. And Greenbrier West, we talked about the injuries that they've had that have plagued them, and obviously they're a team that banks very much on defense. I don't think this will be a very high scoring game. Some of those games have been a little bit lopsided. We've seen it get to the 20s. I might be a little bit surprised if either of these teams score in the 20s in this game.
I'll be shocked, honestly. And that's nothing against either of the offenses. I just think their defenses are really that good. And I think it's going to be a grinder. Might even come down to a turnover. Somebody turns the ball over in the wrong spot. That seems to be the kind of the kicker in these games, is somebody always turns the ball over in a bad spot, gives up a short field. Because I think really trying to drive the ball 70, 80 yards on the other defense, I don't know if that's going to be possible.
It's hard to sustain those drives.
Yeah, especially with the fact that neither team is going to knock you over with a pass game. So it's going to be an old school bruiser. Maybe an hour and a half game. It's decided by field goal, but you just never know. But and then probably what'll happen will come out be 58-55 or something.
If it is decided by a field goal, it's worth noting, and you pointed this out when we were talking this week. Greenbrier West does not have a field goal kicker. James Monroe has a kid in Peyton Gardenier who has a bomb for a leg.
Pretty solid,
a missile there. So, it should be another one. And, like you said, an hour and a half, it might actually be over unless it's homecoming. Then, so,
that's right. But it should be a really good game. It's always fun when those two schools play each other in football. And, both coaching staffs have the utmost respect for the other, but they want to win too.
Yeah, they've played 4 times in the last 2 years. They've met in the regular season and the playoffs both of the last 2 years. So there's been a lot of it, but we won't have that this year because they're in different classes.
Not the playoffs this year,
Moving on to Liberty at Shady Spring. Liberty, if Liberty is going to make the playoffs, they have to win here. Shady Spring, obviously, we talked about it. I don't think they have that margin for error. I got to say, I'm going to take a minute and brag on Liberty. I like the hospitality. Their hospitality there is always good. Usually, in years past, Rita's been there cooking. I didn't go into the home side press box to check and see if they had any of that. But they had a visitor side press box, and that's one of the things I miss about Shady Spring. Was they used to have that visitor side press box, and you just get it all to yourself. You don't have to worry too much about anybody else. You're just able to sit there and get the whole bird's eye view. I wish more. I need to go talk to whoever's doing this and get somebody to put one of those at Independence and put one back at Shady.
Especially Independence and Shady.
Hey, we need to. I don't know exactly how Liberty ended up with it, whose favor they're in, but we need to advocate for getting these at Shady Spring and Independence. But this game's going to be at Shady. For Liberty, I talked about it. They had the 4 straight drives that ended with interceptions, and Shady's very opportunistic defense. I was really kind of impressed with some of what Liberty was able to do. They ran the ball. Westside decided, hey, and I got to give a lot of credit to Coach Mark Workman at Liberty for this quote. I feel like some coaches just kind of, they just give coaches speak. But he gave a really nice elaborate answer, and we talked about why they switched from running early in that Westside game to passing. He's like, they just started cover 0 blitzing us, so we decided we were just going to open it up and pass it, and we were able to hit behind it, and then they shifted back into some cover 1s, and basically they were able to take away that middle part of the field, and then they got some interceptions. But it was a refreshing answer. Shady, it's going to be a little bit tough. I do like Liberty skill players. I think Riley Marty's a really good player. He has really good ball skills. Isaac Williams had a nice explosive run for a touchdown. It's just, are you going to be able to do it against Shady Spring for 4 quarters? Because it's going to be very difficult. And how are you going to be able to mix up your play calling? Because it leaned very heavily. The first 13 plays against that Westside team were all runs. And then from there, it was very, very pass heavy. I think they had 2 runs the rest of the half, and then 9 plays, all passes. So are you going to be able to mix it up and kind of keep Shady on their toes?
Yeah, and Shady's going to be very balanced. They can run it and throw it. They're strong in the secondary, so, if you're having issues throwing the ball, they got some ball hawks back there. I think Shady's maybe just a little too big, a little bigger than they are, and that's eventually going to catch up with Liberty a little bit. But you definitely can see a really good strides for Liberty this year as opposed to the last couple of years. And, that's understandable with the youth that they've had. And now those kids are starting to get a little older and starting to get much better. And, it's a shame they've had the injury at quarterback. It'd been nice to see how that would have worked out. But, I think it'll definitely be a good game. It always seems to be with Liberty and Shady, but I think Shady will get them maybe on attrition a little bit, down at the end, towards the end of the game.
Absolutely. And again, I think if Liberty loses that one, it's probably it on the playoffs. But we'll talk about that whenever we get to that point. Last game, Riverview, a little bit out of the coverage area, kind of right there on the border. We do kind of factor them in. At Tug Valley, Riverview took one on the chin, I believe it was against Sherman. This is, statewide, as far as the Class A playoff picture goes, this is a pretty big game. This is a top 8 matchup here, and it's, if you're Riverview, you want the opportunity to get in there, and you win this game. It's, hey, we got a shot at actually hosting a playoff game. And, again, I graduated from Riverview, tongue-tied here. They've never hosted a playoff game on their field. Whenever we were in the playoffs, whenever I was in school, I didn't play football. But whenever school was in the playoffs, we played the home playoff game was at Mitchell Stadium the first year against Frankfurt, and then the second year we ended up going on the road. So I think that if we had gotten the home playoff game, they would have been able to make sure that the stadium could host it. But that's kind of what's at stake here for Riverview this week.
I was not shocked Sherman won the game. I was a little surprised at the score. Mm-hmm. I saw Sherman in the summertime and some 7-on-7s, and 7-on-7s are what they are, but you can also tell when teams have some skill players, mm-hmm. and they had some skill players. So I wasn't really surprised that they won the game. Felt like Sherman would be good, but I really kind of felt like it'd be a tight game. So that was a little surprising. And Tug Valley's really good, and Tug Valley's kind of in a situation where they kind of need this win too. And anytime you go to Naugatuck, it's not easy, no matter the sport. So it's going to be a tough one for Riverview. It would be a huge game if they could get it. I think it would be the kind of the kicker that puts them maybe into a home playoff game for sure. But outside of something bizarre happening, but. Well, it's going to be tough. I mean, Tug Valley's played Mingo Central good. They played Westside good. I mean, Tug Valley's good.
Absolutely. Moving on from football, first before we move on from football, I'm going to go ahead and announce the Player of the Weeks. For Kanawha Valley is Blake Fisher from Herbert Hoover. We knew he'd end up getting one. Really good player. Talked about a good utility player. And for our area, it is Caden Sims from Meadow Bridge. A lot of good performances. We talked about what Markel Lowe did earlier. Right. Just good stuff all around. But 400 yards is 400 yards. Not Kyler Canada, but Colton Lester had a good game. 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. But you don't get those 400-yard performances. I think that as far as Lootpress goes, this might be the first one that we've covered. Ian Klein from Greenbrier, he's had some where he got close, but I think he was maybe 10 or 13 yards off from 400. I have to go check. But yeah, and to me, what really set it over the edge is you're going out there, you're running for 400 yards and 6 touchdowns, and then you turn back and you're making 17 tackles on defense.
Right, yeah, to be able to play on both sides like that, and he had 2 or 3 runs. I think he had 4 touchdown runs over 37 yards. And the big thing that struck me too was the defensive end, as you said, but also the fact that those games, we see those kind of games in lopsided games, games where teams are overmatched. And this game was a 19-18 game going into the fourth quarter, if I remember correctly, and he had 3 scores in the fourth quarter to separate the game and give Meadow Bridge that win. So that was the huge part, as he had to do it under the pressure of basically playing a tough team and needing that win really bad. So, it was just an all-around performance on both sides.
I think you made a great point there, too. These these performances haven't been blowouts. Like we're talking about, like the Pocahontas County game, I think is where he rushed for 300 yards.
Yep.
That was only like a one-score game. Like they needed every bit of those yardage and those touchdowns.
They needed him to carry the ball, tote to rock, and he's been up to the challenge, So, congratulations to him. It's well earned.
Absolutely. You've got Golf State Tournament the next 2 days. Get to go up. We talked about it a little bit last week, but Shady Spring, from a team standpoint, probably has the best opportunity to bring home a state championship. And we have some low medalists. You talked about a couple of the Shady kids, Cooper Ward, Tyler Beard, have an opportunity. I think it's Rocky Fry from Montcalm was the kid who finished as a Class A state runner-up last year. He's going back with an opportunity there. And Greenbrier East has some good kids too.
Yeah, Isaac Hutchinson's a really, really solid player from Greenbrier East. He's just a sophomore. And that's really what strikes you about this whole thing. I mean, Rocky, I know Rocky seems like he's been there for 12 years now, but, he was runner-up last year, so he legitimately has a shot at winning this thing. So, it's not often that, Montcalm is mentioned in, as far as state golf goes, but, he's done a really good job down there. And, Shady's solid 1 through 4. If they play like they can, there's a really good chance they could win this thing. They'll be battling Wheeling Central, of course, that's their home course up in at the Jones course at Ogleby Park. So, they do have maybe a little bit of advantage as far as that goes. But, the Shady kids have seen the tournament, have seen the course quite a few times. They've played it twice this year. Cooper and Tyler, this will be the 3rd time that they played in the state tournament. Jack Williams, from basketball fame out at Shady, he played it last year. So the young freshman they have, Grant Winkler, is just an incredible player. And, when you talk to him, you can understand that he's, advanced for his age because, when I asked him about the course, one of the first things he mentioned was that you have to know where, have to know your miss. And I thought that was very, if you don't play golf, you probably that don't make any sense. But the whole key to golf is if you don't know where you're going to miss the ball, and you don't know where it's going, you're going to shoot a big number. So, he basically understands the fact that you've got to put it somewhere that if you miss, left or whatever, it's got to be safe. And, I was real impressed with that answer. So, he's a smart kid. His dad was a really good player. So, you never know with golf. It just, from day to day.
A lot of high variance, literally from day to day. It could start pouring rain, on Tuesday, and that just changed everything.
Yep.
Or it could, heat up and get insanely dry, and then that changes everything. You see some high numbers there with the ball really moving.
But it should be a fun tournament. Greenbrier East, they have experience too, so it should be interesting.
Absolutely. I'm going to wrap it up with, we talked about this last week, but Beckley went to not Greenbrier West, wrong GW, went to George Washington, big soccer match, and I thought it was probably the most anticipated regular season match. And they got a 2-0 win. They kept the shutout streak alive. They're able to really keep rolling. Obviously, this isn't the one that they want to win, but if you're Beckley, you're probably feeling really, really good about it.
They're doing all the things that they're supposed to do right now. They're playing really strong defensively. I think that was their 5th straight shutout. And that's the whole, a lot of times in soccer, people don't understand just how big the defensive part of the game is. And, the work they're doing back there, they're getting good work up front. Really what struck me with Beckley is their efficiency on the set pieces. The corners that they're scoring on, they scored on the first 4 against Buchanan Upshur this weekend. That's just, I'm not a huge soccer guy, I haven't watched it forever, but I've never seen that. That's just was incredible to me. So
the score against GW came in on the corner too, didn't it?
Yeah. So, they've been efficient and they're playing well together. And I think, Tyler Snyder made an interesting quote, because he's the one that's been on basically the one doing the corner kicks. And, he had talked about, he leads the team with 8 assists, but, he feels like, the assists are just like him scoring as well. And the quote that struck me was like, as long as we don't mind who's scoring, then we'll be fine. And that's the key, they're a good team. They don't care who scores. They're just worried about winning the game. And that's a big step.
Yeah, it reminds me of that quote that John Lilly always gives.
Yep.
gave during those state championship runs. The head coach of Independence, he said, there's no amount of good a man can't do, if he doesn't care who gets the credit.
Yep.
And that kind of exemplifies exactly what they're saying.
That's what champions are made of. I mean, that's how champions play.
Yeah, it's good to see that, and it'll be fun to kind of see if they can keep it up over the next month. So the state tournament soccer starts here soon. I think in a month it'll probably be over. It's usually that first week
I think it's like
of November.
6th and 8 or something like that.
Yeah.
7 and 9, something like that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
1 month, yeah.
1 month exactly.
Yep.
It'll be a lot of fun. Just kind of avoid the danger, keep up the high level of play, and get that first state tournament appearance since I believe 2010 when they last won a state championship.
Exactly.
So yeah, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap this thing up?
No, it's just getting to that point of the season where it's basically bang, bang, bang on the postseason, so in the state tournaments. So here we go.
And a little bit of Phillies and Mets games in between there. I'm wearing my Phillies pullover. Rusty's wearing his Mets hat, so it makes for some fun banter here in the NLDS. Both of us kind of picking things apart there on our own ends.
Would have been nice to be 2-0, but being 1-1 kind of shocks me a little bit. So we'll go with that.
Absolutely. Well, for my co-host Rusty Udy and our producer and editor Austin Sims, I want to thank you guys. We already welcomed you. I want to thank you guys for tuning in with us. We'll see you next week.